Okay, thank you, Victoria. Hello, welcome everyone. I'm pleased to say we've created the Hangout, especially for our European members and stakeholders, every Wednesday at 3 p.m. UK time and 4 p.m. Central European, and hopefully just in time for some US attendance early on as they enjoy their morning coffee. This is now our 8th European Hangout, and we do already have a planned program over the next 3 weeks to the beginning of July, with the aim of discussing all the topics concerned on an internationally wide basis, with the aim of these conversation and hangouts to help and enrich everyone in the current environment. Now, apart from today, we will have speakers coming up on what's the point of revenue management when there is no revenue, plus a European hotel stats review of the state of play with hot stats, the emerging view direct from the hotel profit and loss account, and that will be our last one on the 1st of July as we finish. However, I am delighted to say that we will return on September the 16th, a Wednesday, 3 p.m. UK, 4 p.m. European, with Michael Levy of Citizen M again, who started us off in April. And we're hoping to chat with Michael to see what has happened in the intervening months and what he has learned since then. If, however, you do have any topics or suggestions, then do please let us know. Now, I should also point out there are already 3 recordings from our previous European Hangouts via a resources page on our main Hangouts page as well. Now, today's discussion will be another masterclass. We've had many industry-wide discussions on new hospitality industry cleaning standards, what this could mean to the average hotelier. Our speaker today has been seriously involved in research on a major product over the last 6 weeks or so, and also how technology can help in this area. But who is Michael Heyward? Well, I've known Michael for some time now, and so know some stuff about him. For a start, he is an Australian from Tasmania, but born in Twickenham in the UK, which probably explains his very strange accent. Michael has been in the hotel industry since 1999. He was with Accor for 7.5 years in Asia Pacific and the UK. IHG in the UK and Europe for just over 5 years after that, mainly in senior revenue management and business support roles. For the past 5 years or so, though, he has led a double life, actually I should say triple life, of lecturing on hospitality at Glion Institute of Higher Education, running his own management consultancy, Heyward Hospitality, and also doing some offshore yachting. But more importantly than all of this, he has been on the advisory board for High Tech Europe for 18 months now and still talking to us. So here we have a truly international Australian, or Brit, I'm not really sure. So now Michael does have some slides. So I suggest that if you would like to see the main slides, that you switch to the speaker view in Zoom. Michael, over to you.
Right, thank you, Carl. Well, I'll bring the slides up on screen now. And Carl, if you can just confirm that you can see that.
Yeah, I can.
Should be full screen.
Yeah.
And just to complete the introductions, the exits are right where you came in. If you look under your seat, there is no life jacket. So sit tight, buckle up, and welcome along for the ride. As Carl said, top right-hand corner of your screen, if you want to see the slides best, just click on the speaker view then, because some of the slides have got a bit of detail in them as we're going through. I thought I'd set the scene a little bit for today's conversation and just explain some of the assumptions that I've made. First of all, I've very much aimed this at an audience of hoteliers, but I'm well aware that we've got people from across Europe and across the North America, across the States as well. So as far as possible, I'll bring a range of those different perspectives in, and occasionally the odd reference to Australia might sneak in as well, but I'm sure Carl will forgive me for that. So the starting point for me in looking at a lot of how we reopen our businesses, and for those of you in the US, we have had our hotels and our restaurants here in the UK closed for about 100 days, I think. Carl, you've been on on a forced lockdown, so you've not even had any football to watch.
Yeah.
And we are expecting, as our Prime Minister confirmed yesterday, to be reopening on the 4th of July, which I hear is a great date for celebrations. So what we're looking at now is how do we reopen our industry across the UK? And different parts of the UK are opening at different times. Different parts of Europe are opening at different times. So as an industry, we've had to respond to major changes. My background in revenue management dates back to when the OTAs first came in and changed the way booking and distribution all worked. Seen how the impact of things like TripAdvisor and social media reviews came in, more recently GDPR, and now with pandemics, which I first experienced the impacts of on our industry when I was in the Pacific region, as Carl said, where we had swine flu, we had SARS, and at that stage I had responsibility for hotels, including places like Japan, which were impacted then as well. So my starting point is to understand that our industry is used to having to deal with major impacts and having to adjust. But the way we do it can be a bit challenging for the way we connect with and engage with the public. So I'll get into what I mean by the public as we go through. So first of all, as the title of today's conversation implies, we're looking at how we're navigating this noise of all the new industry standards and kite marks that are coming out. So from the research I've been doing, this is just a really small snapshot of what we're talking about. So you can already see in the top left-hand corner, highlighted in yellow, that one changed as of midnight last night. So here in the UK, we have an organisation called the AA, the Automobile Association, which is best known for doing the star rating systems and all those sorts of things, the restaurant rating systems. As of a press release last night, they have a new initiative called COVID-19 Confident. They've announced it, but it's still in the process of being put together and implemented. There's another one with a little clock on it, Visit Britain, their Safe Stay. That's still being worked on and not yet released. So that's how much this is changing all of the time. And as you look through this listing here, you've got a lot of international brands, you've got some US brands, you've got some UK brands, you've got governments represented in there, you've got industry bodies represented in there. Some of these are global, some of them are more focused on one particular country or one particular region. With the work that I've been doing on this research program, I started off working on a program which was to be delivered in the UK. And then as we became aware of how many other programs there were, we changed our focus into trying to understand and keep on top of what all of these are and how they're working. So some of the work, and one of the key supporters for this has been the UK Housekeepers Association. And I must say they've been brilliant to work with, because when you are working with highly professional housekeepers, there's a couple of things you can rely on. One is they are, as the name implies, highly professional and set very high standards for their profession. That's why they are part of the association. The other great thing about these professional housekeepers is they're quite pragmatic as well. They really value their staff, and they understand that the quality that they are delivering is very much delivered through their staff. So this is not an academic exercise from their point of view. This is not a government exercise. It's nothing to do with the public service. This is something to support professionals in our industry to understand what's going on and how they can best operate within it. And the UK Housekeepers Association are working on a checklist for best practice that takes into account the work that we're doing to bring together all of this and sets best practice within their work within their part of our industry. So I thought it might be helpful because one of the assumptions people make with this is that it's a matter of choosing a particular industry standard or a kite mark. And some people may have come onto today's session thinking, wonderful, this is going to help me choose which one. So I just thought I'd paint you a picture. So imagine you're responsible for a Hilton in London. So the first thing, as you can see with my little green tick in the bottom left there, you're absolutely going to have to sign up for and deliver on the Hilton Clean Stay initiative. But because you're a Hilton in London, you are also going to want to make sure you pay attention to the UK government, Public Health England, guidance on COVID-19 cleaning in non-healthcare settings. So of course, you'll pay attention to that. Well, Visit Britain, with their program when that comes out, it is going to have an enormous marketing spend behind it, with government funding to get people back into our industry, to turbocharge the restart of our industry. So you will want to be part of that because that's going to generate business for you. If you're with a fantastic US-based brand like Hilton, lots of people who are Hilton Honors members from the States who travel over to London, and the US, Expedia is really strong. If you want to be recognized for having COVID-19 cleaning standards in place, there are only two programs that Expedia are promoting on their website to give you that stamp, and one of them is the WTTC, Safe Travels. So if you want to be on Expedia, you either have to sign up to that or to the Intertech POSI-Check, which is further up. So I've assumed in this case you're going to go with the WTTC. Now, in London, you are likely to want to be part of the London Convention Program, Major Events Program, and London and Partners. I've recently become aware they're working on their own standards, which will apply for the major events that they're running on. So of course, you're going to sign up for that as well. And look, you're on a bit of a roll, and you've heard about the AA that's coming out now. That one's free as well, with some marketing and promotion behind it. So what the hey, why don't you get hold of that? Find out what you need to do to comply to that as well. And really, you know, why not just round it off with the WHO? Now, I imagine some of you, as soon as I mention the WHO, would be thinking to yourselves, well, that one carries a bit of baggage with it. Not everything the WHO has been doing through this last few months has been embraced by all of the public. But once you've gone through all those others that I've mentioned, you may as well pay attention to and have a look at what they're saying in the WHO. So I just wanted to set the scene by saying there is a lot of noise out there. There is no one solution that will take care of everything for you. But for those of us in our industry, we understand that there have to be some choices around here. You can't do everything, although sometimes it might feel like you're going down that path. But you do need to make some decisions of what is important for you. So let's start with that. I would suggest before you even go to that list and start making decisions of what are the right programs for you to participate in, you need to be really clear about your own strategy and objectives. And this is where one of the first points of key learning came out for me in looking at all of these different programs, because the best ones have the spirit of hospitality very much running through them. And that means, as you can see from the photos on the top left, you are thinking not just about our customers coming into the hotel with their trundle bags, but you're also thinking about our colleagues. And behind our colleagues, there is the community. So you've got a little village fete picture there to give you an impression of the community that sits behind those staff. You could say by extension that applies to our customers as well. But having reviewed many of these programs in detail, one of the things that I have found is that many of them pay scant attention to our staff. And there are quite a few surveys that I've seen where people have spoken to their staff about returning to work and they do not feel confidence in it being safe to return to work. So from a housekeeper's point of view, that's one of your starting points. How do we go about making sure that we are delivering confidence in our staff? Another point that we need to be really clear about when we're looking at these initiatives is that there are a lot of them out there, and many of our customers and a lot of our staff, a lot of our colleagues have a quite understandable skepticism about how safe it is to have hospitality coming back into their hotels and to be travelling again. We've seen here in the UK quite a lot of reaction from leisure destinations of people who are afraid of what will happen when the Londoners descend in their large four-wheel drives on their beautiful little idyllic coastal villages or mountain getaways, because they felt quite safe in their isolated little communities. So that is one of the key areas we need to look at, and people will partly judge us or significantly judge us on what they see. They will trust what they see more than the actual marketing. So when I say people trust what they see, if I can give you an example of a good friend of mine going to a supermarket here in the UK. She drives into the supermarket car park. For those of us that aren't as familiar with the UK, we've got several really big supermarket chains that compete with each other across the UK. So she drives into the car park, has a look across there, and they are paying no real attention to any of the standards that we have become used to over the recent months here in the UK. They're not worried about social distancing. They're not enforcing it in any way. They're not wiping down the trolleys as other places have been. They're just allowing it to be a bit of a free-for-all. So what does she do? Gets back in her car, goes on to the next supermarket. Next supermarket, they're paying a little bit more attention, but she still doesn't feel safe there. She ends up going to her third or fourth choice supermarket because visibly to her, that's where she can see that these places have her safety at heart, and they are making sure that they are keeping the social distancing going on. So if you are a staff member and you go to work and someone has one of those infrared temperature devices and is checking the temperature of all the staff when they come to work, there is that little bit of anxiousness that you think, oh, I hope I'm okay. But once you get beyond that, there is a much higher level of confidence in you being safe at going to work in this workplace. So what are people seeing from a customer point of view? What are we doing from a colleague's point of view? What are the community around us observing in the way we work? One of the people that I've been talking to recently works with a company that provides an app that tracks the safety of the staff members, of the colleagues, and it can connect in with your infrared temperature checks. Part of what they've experienced in countries where they've been allowed to reopen hotels and restaurants is that when they are, in the case of the restaurant that we were talking about, checking staff members' temperature on arrival before they even come on the premises, all the staff can see that and other people in the area can see that. And it means people are trusting that you are doing things to make that place safer. And they are seeing higher demand for businesses that are visibly and obviously doing things that protect the safety of their colleagues and their customers, and by extension, the community around them. So those are the sorts of things that we're thinking about. Actions do speak loudest, but it can't just be someone doing that at the staff entrance. It can't just be a check at the beginning of your shift. It really gets down to little things like when you're going for a check-in, are the staff ensuring that there is a good distance between the people who are waiting to check in? Is the receptionist wiping down the credit card machine between one person using it and the next person using it. Those are the things that will have an impact on whether people trust you or not. And let's be very clear, with all of these different initiatives, we should understand that because there is this issue around cost, I've had lots of conversations about people concerned about the cost of these various different changes and increases in cleanliness and hygiene standards. There are going to be businesses who sign up for some of these standards and then do not follow through on them. So what we have seen here in the UK, and I've got recent media articles from Australia as well, of where the media have quite enjoyed going into hotels, doing those swab tests and publishing the results of that to show that there are major cleanliness issues in certain hotels or groups of hotels. And they quite enjoy doing that. That is something which we should expect. That kind of investigative journalism may well impact some of our businesses who are claiming to be COVID safe or to have higher standards of cleanliness than in the past. And even beyond that, we can be absolutely certain of social media reactions to businesses that are not in any way following any kind of distancing or other forms of disinfectant processes. So what I would encourage you to do before we get into the details of any of these standards is think about your positioning statement. Think about the motivations of your CCC, your customers, your colleagues, and your immediate community. Those are the things that you need to have in mind before you take that next step and have a look at the different standards and kite marks. One of the first ones that came out, the Singapore government was quite strong in what they put in place. And if you can read the fine print on that little image in the top left, these standards include an element of inspection, and they are certified, and they have these green badges that they can put up in the different places. I talked to you earlier about the AA COVID-19 Confident. That came out last night, early this morning. And another example is a global brand like Accor with their All Safe program. All of these different programs, and as I said, I showed you that sample list at the beginning, have broadly the same purpose. What they're trying to do is to instill public confidence in the hospitality industry. But there are significant differences between something like Accor with a global program, or the AA with a UK-based program, or the Singapore government with their Singaporean program. One of the things that we've been very much seeing in this, even in the EU, where there are many things that are standards across all of Europe, when it comes to the response to COVID-19, every country is doing their own thing. And for you guys in the US, and it's the same thing for us in Australia, that gets even more complicated. It's not just the global and the national differences, but we also have differences from state to state. In Australia, they locked down the borders between Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, West Australia, and they got to that level of lockdown. So for you guys in the US, you will have state differences as well. Now, not all of these programs are verified. Some of these are just programs that you can go online, download all the information, fill in a checklist to say, oh yeah, we'll do that, absolutely, we'll sign up for that. But there's nothing to actually verify that you are doing it. So I've got that little quote, I think it was one of Ronald Reagan's favorite terms when he was working with Gorbachev and they were looking at nuclear disarmament. One of the things they could agree on between the two of them was the need to trust each other, but to verify. And I would argue that in choosing a kite mark to sign up to, if you're wanting to really make something of that and promote that and really get out there to the public to show what you're doing, then don't allow yourself to be in that situation where other operators who are more under pressure and worried about the cost implications because of the extreme financial pressure they're under, sign up for something and don't do it. And then that kite mark or that standard gets criticized and undermined, and you have the impact of that as well. Have a look for the ones that have some form of verification in them. And another thing you should look at is the degree to which they are proactively communicating. Because from my revenue management background, I can tell you that customer preference really only comes from informed choices. The academic research over many years now has shown that one of the top criteria for people choosing a place to stay is cleanliness. But they have not had the ability to make an informed choice in the past in the same way they will be able to now with these various standards and kite marks. So think about the communication. I mentioned before, Visit Britain is putting together a significant budget for a marketing program for their kite mark. That would be a great incentive to consider that to be something that you are participating in, because that will give you customer preference from people who are concerned about safe travel as we begin to reopen. And some of these are also doing a similar thing to what we've done with GDPR. So GDPR requires a privacy officer, and in this situation, there are cleanliness officers who are put in place in many businesses as part of these programs. So have a think about who is taking responsibility in your business for ensuring the delivery of those standards. So keep an eye on what you're trying to achieve here and choose the right ones for you. But you should be very aware that you won't find any one of these kite marks that takes care of everything you need. So at some point, you may need to supplement the standards you've signed up to with additional things that you choose to do to take care of either your colleagues or your community that may go above and beyond the basic requirements of some of these standards. So these are some of the things to have a look at and some of the things to scrutinize with the different standards that you're looking at. So it wouldn't be a high-tech conversation without talking tech. So let's get into some of the tech. First of all, on the left-hand side, there are three main forms of cleaning. The first one that you will have people approaching you, trying to sell you the equipment for, is ozone. And one of the things you need to be very clear about is that the ozone cleaning method, it is toxic. You cannot be in the room when one of these machines is operating. It's a bit like if at home you've decided the oven needs a clean and you put one of those things in there, you set the bomb off and you go away. Or in some parts of the world where you might have a pest control issue, you set off one of these nasty things, you get out of the house, you come back a couple of days later or whatever it may be, when everything's cleared away. These ozone machines can be damaging to people's lungs. They can be really problematic for people. That's why they're so good at killing bugs, because they basically kill everything in the room. Ionizing spray is another method that can be used. And again, you need to be thinking about how this is applied. But the one that most people are talking about is the use of different disinfectants. So Marriott's, that photo you've seen, I'm sure, many times on the left-hand side there, of the guy with the weapon that he's swiped from a stormtrooper. So this is one of the electrostatic sprayers. It is spraying disinfectant on the surfaces, but not all disinfectants have been proven to work against COVID-19. So that can work, but it's not the machine that's doing the work, it's the disinfectant that's doing the work, and you need to understand the difference between one and another. That's why in the partnerships, you've got Hilton partnering with Lysol and Mayo Clinic, IHG with Ecolab and Diversi, Accor, interestingly, with Bureau Veritas, and with an insurance company with AXA. So that's part of bringing in the necessary technology. Marriott have got their Global Cleaning Council, with a representative on there from Ecolab. So all the big guys are bringing in these expertise to try and make sure the right things are being used. So just be careful if you decide you're going to save money on something like disinfectant and move away from the standard that you've been told to use. So on the right-hand side, technologies that you should be thinking about now. Thermal screening. Big difference in how you handle this between staff, where, as you can see in the little image there, you can use the infrared thermal detectors, and you can make that part of starting a shift, part of the processes that you go through. And as I said, if you want to have information on how you can connect that with an app as well, that links into your HR systems, that allows your staff to check for various symptoms. There are a range of things you can do with that. For guests, it's a little bit harder to walk up to them with a rubber gloved hand and put one of these detectors right in front of their heads. Some people may be a little put off by that. And as I'm sure most of you are aware, in many of the big airports, they have these screens and thermal cameras. I was talking to someone about how you can put those into the hotels, and absolutely you can go down that path. If you're wanting to have that, you need to make sure people are coming within 2 meters. So you need to make sure your entries are controlled so that people come past them. With the airports that I've been through that are using them, one of the things that we see is that it's those major corridors and traffic ways where they put them. You need a staff member who's monitoring it, and you need some people who can take a guest to one side if there is something that they pick up and they need to have a conversation with someone. So typically with guests, that kind of approach is much more likely to work, but you have to have some clear processes around it, and there are some very definite costs around that. Second one that you should be looking at and thinking about is linen treatments. I've become aware of these linen treatments that were originally designed for when linen is being shipped overseas. So it's sitting in a shipping container for several weeks on end. They have this antibacterial treatment so that they don't have issues with mildew or anything like that when the linen arrives at its destination. They've had these treatments checked, and they are stated to be effective against all sorts of bacteria and also against COVID-19. So that's one of the things that you should be considering and having a look at, and you can implement that straight away if you're wanting to. And then the process management. So if you're interested in looking at that side of things, housekeeping systems, flex keeping is one that I know quite well. So there's a range of different ways you can look at that. So just to quickly recap on those, thermal screening, you could look at something like Harry, and I can introduce you to Pete, who's doing that. The thermal screening, I think we've got Zaran on there. Transputech, they are one of the suppliers that can do things like that. Microfresh is the linen treatment that I've become aware of. And there's a whole range of process management tools that you can use, often referred to as housekeeping process tools. So I'm not telling you that those are the ones to use, but if you're looking for an idea of the kinds of things to look at, let me know and I can point you in the right direction to start looking at what you can do. Technologies for the near future. I'm calling them near future because they're not the kind of things you can just plug in straight away. You've seen the touch-free check-in and check-out that Hilton have been promoting. Door locks, another thing that they're talking about. You can't replace all the locks in all of the hotels straight away. That's going to take time. And there's some really interesting stuff being done by Ave Air, looking at air quality sensors in guests' rooms. So you will be able to detect whether there's someone in the room. You'll be able to detect if the cleaning is being done to the right standard, including the use of the right chemicals at the right times. You'll be able to detect if there are issues with humidity or with mildew or anything like that in the room. So air quality will be one of the things that people are looking at. So just to try and sum up all of this, I know I'm moving fast because there's a lot to get through. It is a noisy space. You need to be clear on what you're trying to achieve. Start with your strategy, then move on to looking at the different standards and choose the ones that are going to best support your business to get to where you need to be. And just linking back to what we heard last week from Phil LeBrun, he was talking about agility. All of this is great with the different tools and everything else, but I can absolutely tell you with complete confidence, the situation as it is today is changing and will continue to change. So you need to be agile, you need to be able to adapt. We are not working in a static environment. Now I can breathe and maybe hand back to you, Carl. Have you got any questions that have come up that...
Yeah, we have, Michael, a couple of interesting ones. I guess
Right.
the obvious one, thinking about where you started and where you've ended, so to speak, is one of consolidation. Do you see any likelihood that some of these standards will be consolidated in any shape or form, whether it's between brands or countries or any kind of consolidation, so that, you know, we centralize on one standard?
I think that would be brilliant if that was possible. I think our customers would love that because then it's really simple and they know what they can trust. In all honesty, I think we've got a snowball's chance in hell of achieving that. And I'll give you two main reasons why. The first one is an absolute deal breaker and should be clear for everyone to understand. Every country is responding in different ways and has different requirements. So you can't have a standard that works everywhere unless you end up going to the lowest common denominator, which is not what we're looking for. So that's the first reason why it won't. The second one is to do with my industry skepticism. I've seen how when the OTAs really came in strongly, we had a situation that every brand came up with their own website, their own approach, and we've never been able to get back to a point where our industry and the hoteliers were in charge. Every brand came up with their own thing, they all marketed their own thing, they all went in a different direction. That seems to be the way we work, and I think it's extremely unlikely that the major brands would come together and just create one standard. I would love it, but I think it's a fantasy, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's not helped by the fractured nature of our industry's ownership, is it either? Okay, a question from Ahmad Abdel Magwood here, which is fairly straightforward. Do any of the standards recommend a stay gap between stays, as in a number of days? I imagine that means in terms of how long you leave the room between having somebody stay there.
That is used as a guideline, and one of the words to watch out for is guidelines. There's a big difference between things that are mandated and required by a standard and things that are a guideline. That is a guideline in quite a few of them, but there is also a significant difference between applying that principle to every guest that checks out, which is unsustainable, and many of them are 72 hours is the recommendation. Wow. So if it's going to be a 72-hour gap, once someone checks out, sorry, you've lost that room for days. You can't sustain that on any profitable level of occupancy. So much more, the standards that are being updated at the moment are using that when there has been a guest who has had COVID-19 and been tested, and you've known that to be the case. So there are a range of different options. One is to bring in a healthcare level deep clean into that room, or another is to give it a disinfectant and a full clean, and then to leave it fallow, as they say, for 72 hours. So you're doing both things at once. But just building on that disinfecting point, there's a big difference between the standards that effectively tell you to go in and clean the room and then disinfect the room. That does not protect your colleagues. The best standards will say to you, you should go in and disinfect a room, then clean it with detergent, and then disinfect it again at the end. That three-stage process protects your colleagues as well as your customers.
Right.
So there you go. Double your money on that question.
Yeah. Just building on that,
Yep.
we talked yesterday about technology that can monitor movement in rooms for cleaning. So I think you used the example of if you had a very neat and tidy Japanese couple who, you know, left their room immaculate, where the chambermaid may not think, oh, I don't have to tidy this, or I don't have to disinfect it much because it's clean. And actually, you need to monitor that fact that the chambermaid or cleaning person had actually cleaned the room anyway, regardless.
Yeah. So particularly when I was talking with Casper about the work they're doing on what I'm going to colloquially refer to as an electronic nose. So it's a little sensor that sits in your room, a digital nose, if you like. It sits in the hotel room, and it can tell you that the right chemicals are being used as well. So as a hotelier, if you've got outsourced housekeeping, have you ever wondered to yourself whether the housekeepers are using the right chemicals? Or are they using cheaper chemicals and maybe less of them? Is the room attendant seeing, as Carl said, a beautifully neat and tidy room and just enjoying watching TV for 10 minutes before they do a quick tidy up and move on? Or are they actually doing the level of cleaning that is required? I think the key words here are due diligence, because there is a degree of responsibility on you as a hotelier to make every possible effort to ensure that the customer's room, that the guest's room is clean to the standards that you stipulate. It's not good enough for you to just tell someone to do it and then go, well, there you go, my responsibility ends there. I think the example I mentioned was when we had Which magazine, the consumer protection organisation here in the UK. One of the hotels I was working with got absolutely slammed in the media for having very low standards. The GM's response was, outsource housekeeping, not my problem. He was really beaten up by the management, not literally, but figuratively, because the making sure the quality levels in the contract are maintained is the responsibility of the manager. So I would say something like one of those devices that can give you written documentation and tracked, and you've got the records to show that the cleaning is being done every time to the standard required. That's the kind of confidence that you can have in the commitment you make to a customer, compared to, have I got a housekeeping contractor who came in at a very low price and is cutting corners everywhere they possibly can? Because unfortunately, that is a business reality. We've seen housekeeping costs driven down and driven down and driven down. Now some of that is going to come home to roost if we don't deliver the quality in cleanliness.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to come to RP in a couple of minutes because he's got 4 or 5 different comments there. But I'm going to ask you a particular question which came up in the registration question, but from 2 different angles. The first, it's the insurance question. So the one is, do you think travel insurance will be impacted by where people stay based on what the hotels say? And then the other question, if you like, the running around the other side of the table, are you aware of any of these standards, once adopted, having any impact on a hotel's insurance policy and costs thereof?
I'll take the last part of the question first. No, I'm not aware of any impacts on insurance costs, but I'm very open to receiving information from people and having more of a conversation with people who are in that area. So yeah, I'd be very interested to hear about that. I'm already seeing and hearing about the major corporates having this as, I mean, we've all seen in the RFPs for many years that the corporates want to know, do you have a fire sprinkler system in your hotel? Do you do full evacuation drills? They already have quite a bit of health and safety stuff coming in there. Those corporates have a duty of care to their staff when they are traveling. And not only do I expect, but I already know that that is being reviewed And that is partly why the big international chains have come out with these programs, because they are required to now by the big global corporates. If you want to have any of these people who are traveling the world on business, staying in your hotels, you need to have something that shows you are taking your duty of care very seriously, and by extension, their employer is. So that is, I think, going to be a bigger driver quicker than the insurance aspect of it.
So your angle here is one of, course, corporate travel is going to play a big part of this. Now, we talked yesterday, just briefly, about cleanliness being actually a filter now on some of the big OTA websites.
Well, that was interesting because I checked it this morning. We talked about putting a screenshot on for that.
Yeah.
So on the weekend, I was having a bit of a hunt round, and Booking.com had a filter on cleanliness. I checked this morning, it's disappeared. Now, I wondered whether they were doing some A/B testing. So I grabbed another laptop and had a look, and it wasn't there. And I had a look on my tablet, and it wasn't there. But when Carl and I were talking about this at the beginning of the week, Booking.com had a filter where you could sort in order of cleanliness. So I did that for London, and I did that for Paris, and I discovered that only 3 hotels in London or Paris had 10 out of 10 on Booking.com, because it's based purely on the guest comments. Only 3 hotels had 10 out of 10. All 3 of them had less than 10 responses to the customer feedback, and all 3 of them in both cities had been open for less than a year. So I don't see the value in using something like a TripAdvisor cleanliness score or a Booking.com customer-based cleanliness score. Customers typically are not great at telling the difference between maintenance and cleanliness, and customers who get grumpy with you will slam you for everything. Even if you are hospital grade clean, if they have an argument with someone on checkout, they'll just slam you for everything. So I don't trust them. And I think most customers are smart enough to know that some people just whinge.
Yeah. I suspect what they may do is start putting on those filters is actually some of the standards you mentioned earlier. Okay.
Well, that's what Expedia have done with the 2 that I highlighted on the earlier slide. Yes.
Ah, perfect. Okay. RP, I don't know if you're still online. You've posted about 4 or 5 comments and questions. Do you have a particular question you'd like to ask Michael?
No, I just wanted to say these are the thoughts that we have in the United States, and how does those thoughts differ to either Europe or Australia? I don't want to repeat what I've said on the chat line, but those are the things that are being discussed here in terms of trying to bring that customer confidence. You have to work on those 4 lines to give them a sense of safety, a sense of well-being, to say I'm at a safe place because I see these are the 4 things that are being followed. And you can summarize those up for me better.
Okay. Right. Eric, you had a question.
Sorry, if I can just pick up on that.
Sure, Michael.
I would say, as far as giving your customers confidence and making them feel like it's safe to travel, that has to start with your colleagues. If your colleagues don't feel safe in coming to work, if they are worried because they're interacting with a lot of customers, then they are not going to be able to give the customers the same degree of confidence.
In the United States, we've had an issue where the government is giving them more benefits, though they are not wanting to come to work. Is becoming a big issue now. They're getting paid more than what they would get paid at home.
Yeah.
So the government is putting some kind of regulations in place to say you have to report every week in terms of the unemployment department to say where you have applied and what the responses were, and it's employer's responsibility to respond back to say, yeah, we offered a job to this person, but they didn't accept it. And that time when that happens, the benefits stop.
Yeah. I think this is a great example of the issues that are changing from one country to another. Here in the UK and quite a few places in Europe, the government has been paying a significant percentage of people's salary for them to stay at home. But we know that that will stop at some point. When that stops, we are likely to have really high levels of redundancies. So similar to what you're talking about there, Roman, this is a great deal for the staff at the moment. They may feel like they're doing better not working than if they do work, but there will come a point where it stops. And at that point where it stops, if they don't have a job to come back to, and I would expect for you as a business person, the people who've come back and who are supporting your business will be the ones who are most likely to keep their jobs if you have to reduce your staffing. So there are all sorts of complexities in how this is going to play out. And from our colleagues' side and their interaction with your business, that is a really important decision point for them and for you.
The second second thing that I mentioned on the chat was, previously we used to hide our staff members working behind the curtains. Now we need to show them in front of the house to show people and customers what they are doing, how they're keeping things clean, like being in the front of the house to give them that level of confidence.
Absolutely. And I think Zoran's got a comment on that as well. People will trust what they see a lot more. So if they see that you are out there making an effort to get guests to keep that distance, another way of saying that is if they don't see you wiping down the credit card machine, and this is going to need to be a receptionist who takes responsibility for cleaning something between one customer and the next, you're going to have a really awkward moment there with a customer who may feel like they have a higher degree of vulnerability. We've got this issue here in the UK where people have concerns if they're from minority ethnic groups or Asian or Black, because they have higher levels of risk for COVID. So what are you doing to protect those minority groups, many of whom work in our hotels in public area roles and back of house roles? So there's some really important strategic decisions at a time when the financial pressure is massive. So thank you for that, Roman.
Okay, Eric, you had an interesting thought process on the housekeeping question.
Yeah, it's really in terms of the additional impacts to the housekeeping issue. Do you foresee housekeeping being taken back in-house, considering the much higher profile that this department should now enjoy?
I would like to say yes. I think there are two things that are going to come into play. And I mentioned earlier that there is a risk element where I put on the slide cost versus confidence and the risks you're prepared to take. I would say there are going to be more hotels that decide they need to bring this back in-house. But I think alongside that is going to be a change in the procurement dynamic. One of the people I've been talking to quite a lot works for an outsourced housekeeping agency, runs an outsourced housekeeping agency here in the UK. He's sick and tired of being beaten for contracts by people who are prepared to take a price down below which it is financially possible to deliver the quality that the contract requires. So I would say the procurement balance will have to shift much more into how do we ensure that there is that duty of care being observed. So just as one little example, you may now require to have a housekeeping system, so something like FlexKeeping or something like that, to allow you centrally to be able to track the quality performance across the contract, across multiple sites, and enforce penalties and have consequences that are much higher than they are now. At the moment, there are cowboys. There are, sorry, that's unkind. There are disreputable operators, in my opinion, and I have quite strong opinions on this, in the area of outsourced housekeeping, and they are allowed to get away with how they're operating. I think that is the first thing that's going to change. People will get much tighter and demand more from the quality side of that balance.
Do you think they'll be willing to pay for it?
Well, there are different points of view at the moment on the cost, and I've been speaking to Michael at Hotstats. He's committed that they're going to do some work once more hotels are opening on looking at cleaning costs after hotels have reopened with new standards compared to what they were before. I would expect there is going to be a bit of an increase in costs, but I don't think it'll be huge. I've read some papers. There was a consultant who was saying across the industry, across the world, there's going to be billions of dollars more in cost for meeting these standards. And I'm a bit cynical about claims like that. First of all, when you look globally, it's easy to make numbers look big very quickly. But I don't think enough of these programs are in place in enough places for us to see the cost. And I think we've dealt with cost issues quite a lot. Things like when we looked at GDPR and we were tearing our hair out and saying, this is going to cost so much, I can't operate this, I can't do that. I'm confident our industry will find ways to deal with that.
Great. Michael,
yep.
Thank you so much. I cannot believe it. Another hour on European Hangouts has disappeared right in front of our eyes. That was absolutely superb. Thank you very much. And with that, I will hand back to Victoria.
I just wanted to say, if anyone does want more information on any points, or if you've got a set of standards for your group of hotels and you're interested in knowing how they match up to some of these others, feel free to contact me. My email address is there. Happy to have a conversation in how we can help you make some choices and have a look at how one standard matches up against another. So thank you, Carl.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Victoria.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to everyone for joining the Europe Hangout today. Before we close, remember that HFTP is hosting Europe Hangouts every Wednesday at 3 p.m. UK time. Join us next Wednesday, June 24th, with Klaus Kohlmeier, Chief Evangelist at Ideas, on the topic of revenue management in times of limited revenues. What's the point? Come and listen to Klaus discuss how heads of revenue management, chief commercial officers, and hotel leaders are using the current time to lean into a more analytical, data-driven approach to budgeting, forecasting, and pricing to take full advantage of coming resurfacing in demand. Also, the best of HFTP, including High Tech, the annual convention, and club forum is scheduled October 26th through 29th, 2020 in San Antonio, Texas. Thank you again for joining us today. We hope to see you again next week, and this closes today's Europe Hangout.